Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the Jupyter Contributors Call. It's the 14th of January. The rules for the Ides of a month are complicated. I don't remember if it's the Ides of January. It's probably not. Please know that this call operates under the Jupyter governance and the code of conduct. And yeah, you know it's being recorded. Let's see, there's an agenda. Please sign in if you wish and add your names to the agenda if there's something you'd like to discuss. And with that, I will pass it to Mike, who is at the top of the agenda. We can't hear you right now, so we can wait for a minute. Yeah. Okay. In the interim, maybe I'll do my small EC update. Actually, no, it looks like we may be testing Mike's audio back and forth, so let's not do that. Oh, I hear something just very quietly. Okay. All right. So we'll start with my EC update. We'll come back. As you're probably aware, because there was an email sent out to everybody who voted, there was a Jupyter EC election last year. The results came in, but I realized we don't have a public announcement, blog post, anything yet. We only sent the email out to a large part of the community, but not the public. So just so you know, yesterday the full EC met, plus almost the full EC. Actually, we were one member short. But I just wanted to say a thing that came up in that call that's going to be a theme for this year is trying to have a coherent vision for where Jupyter is headed and all of the complexity that implies. And I know a lot of projects have more or less formal road mapping sessions sometimes. I know the hub team is doing that this month. I know the lab team has begun sort of sprints toward a major version with conversations like this in the past, and we probably will in the future. And I say lab, frontends team. But in general, if it's the case that one of the projects you're involved with is doing something like this, please, if you remember, invite the EC. Maybe we'll tag along, because gathering information about where the actual things being built see themselves going is super helpful to weave together a coherent story. I see Jason is also on this call. He's in the EC. Is there something maybe you'd like to add? You don't have to. I'm going to take that silence as no thanks. So yeah, that's all. We don't have an upcoming roadmap plan for any of the things that I know about specifically, but maybe I just don't know yet. Either way, this is one of those cases where I think for the recent past, most of the things that we've spoken about the EC doing have been something about creating governance of some sort or other, writing rules or moving from one fiscal sponsor to another, or basically some variety of changing structures. And I think right now we actually kind of have a relatively stable era. And so it would be good to actually focus on what's Jupyter and what are we building. That's it for me. I hope Mike's audio works now.
I hope so too.
Oh, sweet. There it is. Cool.
Alrighty. So just announcing it out loud for anyone interested on this call, there were new releases of JupyterLab 4.52 and 4.6.0 Alpha 1. Couple of interesting bug fixes in the patch version. The only notable one that stands out is the change of the behavior with copycat paste, not using the browser/system clipboard, which is a major change, but necessary because of the regressions that this change introduced. But it can be still opted in. You can still opt to have the system clipboard as the default by changing the settings or using overrides JSON. For Google Summer of Code that we discussed last week and a month ago on the two meetings back, I've opened an issue on the governance repo. In part, it is to see if any of the projects is interested in participating and if folks would like to mentor a student. Otherwise, it is also asking the SC if there would be potentially any assistance in filling in the forms, submission reporting, and management in general. I know that there's some overhead and that NumFocus used to help with that. I also know that Linux Foundation in general should have someone who is capable of doing that because the Linux Foundation itself is participating in Google Summer of Code for the Linux as operating system. But I don't know if they ever assisted any of the other foundations which are under LF. So yeah, if you would potentially have capacity to mentor or be a co-mentor, please leave a comment on the issue. I will also paste that into the chat, make that a bit easier. And another topic is the update snapshots workflow, which because of various security issues and how the GitHub actions are designed and very easy to shoot yourself in the foot, we needed to write lots of checks before executing the update snapshot job. And that was a lot of boilerplate. That was a lot of code very vulnerable to any changes in the GitHub API. And updating that across between 50 to 100 repositories is not easy, not nice. Martin went ahead and followed on idea earlier to centralize that. And now we have a single implementation in maintainer tools repo, and other repositories can just use that action as a part of the workflow, which hopefully will make patching things easier in the future. So I really recommend everyone who has a repo which is using this action to update. Once we cut a new version of extension template, that could be done by upgrading to the latest extension template version if you are using extension template for JupyterLab or notebook extensions, but otherwise for projects which are not extensions, or if you are just able to copy and paste the relevant div right now, you can do that today. You don't need to wait for that. And it's like literally deleting about 30, 40 lines and inserting 3 lines which reference the new action. So pretty simple to do and will also help us because we would have fewer repositories to update in the future. I've linked an example PR which updates the JupyterLab favorites in the notes, and also linking that in the chat. By the way, JupyterLab favorites had a new release, a couple new features, enhancements in there. And finishing up with announcements now, moving to questions and discussion. There is an issue opened by one of the contributors asking for potential improvements to the review workflow, which I think is absolutely warranted, given that we recently went from under 100 PRs to over 150 PRs waiting in review. Maybe that has something to do with the code generation LLM tools, which make it easier to write PRs, but we don't use LLMs to review the code just yet. So there is a slight imbalance of capacity. The issue originally proposed to add a workflow that would allow the author of a PR to request reviews, to ping anyone who would sign up to a list of reviewers, which is fine. Like having a command in a comment is what some organization repositories do. And another alternative is using a code owner's file, which has the benefit of easily distributing data across like different parts of the code base. Could ping different people when they are edited, and a pull request touches on those. The ping would go to the code owner of that particular branch of the directory in the repo. Yeah, any thoughts on that? Any people who would like to be code owners of particular package? I was thinking that this might be a good thing when it comes to new features. Like if someone wants to contribute another package, we already like say that they should maintain that for some reasonable amount of time. But adding themselves as a code owner, and ideally also someone else from the organization, would really kind of codify that. Thoughts, comments?
I mean, I think that's a interesting mechanism and a good initiative. I myself am actively considering, but like giving a commitment to join code owners. But I need to like talk to my management, so to speak, and come back on this. Let's say next week or something.
So I guess it depends on what what's the thing where you were short on, and do we have potential reviewers who are currently not reviewing because they don't know what to review, or is it just we don't have enough potential reviewers and we're basically asking people to volunteer to become regular reviewers? Like what this solution, it will work if there's already some number of people kind of ready to step up to do this. My understanding was there are a handful of informal code owners and they just don't have enough attention to allocate to this. So I'm not sure. I don't have a strong feeling about this, but it sort of seems to solve a different problem than what we have, I think. I'm not sure.
I think we have both problems now. A month ago, I would say we only had the capacity restraint, and that meant that our review queue was not going down, and sometimes was slowly growing at a rate of 1 or 2 pull requests a month. That was manageable. I came back after 2 weeks of absence, and I think we now have the other problem as well. I don't know which PRs to review. And I thought that will self heal and resolve after a week or so. I still like there's just too many. And some people unfortunately open draft PRs without marking them as draft. Some people are very diligent, open them as drafts, undraft once they are ready, and that's nice. That sends me an email. I have too many emails to look at. I do not get a ping then. So getting a ping when a PR is ready for review and it's in the part of the code base that I'm interested in maintaining would be helpful to me personally. I don't know if this overflow of PRs will continue, but if it does, I think there is value in code owners personally.
Okay. I mean, I think your intuition on this is going to probably be way more representative than mine. You are more involved. What do other people think? Any thoughts?
I've got one relevant thought. I mean, I'm very happy with the code owners. That's fine. Um, on Bokeh, I have experience of like a bespoke system for indicating if a PR is ready for review or not. So there are separate labels for sort of status, and you have work in progress and ready for review and so on. I'm used to that. It's fine. Still, I find it a real pain because what tends to happen is the major contributors know the protocol works well for them. Somebody new comes along, they don't really know the protocol, and because it's different from other repos, they'll write a PR, then they'll sit there and wait, and they'll say, after a month, I get really annoyed. Why hasn't anybody viewed it? And some maintainer has to say, well, you need to tick this box or set this label or something. So it's I'm not sure it's a net saving of time. It's just moving where that time is spent and who's using it.
Yeah, so that addresses the idea of having a command in a comment. Yeah, that would potentially introduce this friction. And thank you for that in general. I think this is a useful insight. I think code owners do not risk that because by default you open a pull request which addresses like touches on a file that has code owners attached to it, and then immediately you get a request for review. Because the negative here, I think there are two things that can go wrong. One, someone opens a pull request which should have been draft and pings people, and then once it is ready, people do not get another ping or are no longer interested because they do not notice this transition from, oh, that was a draft, I shouldn't pay attention, to, okay, now it's actually ready. And I forgot about the other thing. I will speak about this once I remember.
I do like the code owners idea because it works both ways. People can find out who is responsible, but also it's possible for so some of us who are experienced enough maintainers but maybe don't do a lot in JupyterLab. I'm personally slightly scared of making new PRs to JupyterLab and ending up being responsible for a large thing, like has happened in other repos. So if sort of the code owners are written down, I can see myself being a code owner for a small area that I've contributed to, but it's not going to expand and I end up being pinged to fix everything that scares me.
Yeah, that would be very nice.
We would need some review eventually if the code owners is set up, and when people disappear, but they're still sort of labeled as a code owner, we have to handle that eventually.
Yes, so the problem could be that someone is labeled as a code owner, goes for holidays for 2 months, and a PR sits there because people think that the code owner will review, which might not happen until they come back from the holiday. So not even saying that someone moved on and is no longer maintaining the code base, they might be just away. So that might give a false sense of someone is going to look at this PR, which is in part about documenting the expectations. And the fact that someone got a ping for code owners doesn't mean that they will actually look at it. And the other is it could disincentivize people, other people from reviewing the PR because they are not code owners. So like there is a new contributor and they were listed as a code owner for one particular package. And they might not feel like it would be inappropriate to review a PR which touches on a different package, which I don't think should be the case in JupyterLab. Maybe in some projects that's true, but I don't think that's the case here. And I guess that also translates to many other Jupyter repositories in general, that people are welcome to review pull requests, whether they touch on something they worked on or not.
I think we can address some of that with our own written guidelines and some of that automated. So you could have a bot that if a code owner has been pinged but hasn't made any sort of comment, whether it's to add a label or a comment or whatever, if there's no activity from the pinged code owner after X days, they get dropped and maybe a different one gets pinged or something. So nothing falls through the cracks forever, even if there is some slippage. You could also have you could have similar sort of rules to voting, right? You have to vote in some subset of the votes called, or you're automatically taken off of a voting body. There's also um, some level of, like, before you go on holiday, there's a few things you do to take care. Like this could be one of them, like take yourself off that list temporarily. But yeah, I think you're right to sketch out the places where it might cause a problem, but they might be simple enough to address as well.
I wonder, I never worked with that on GitHub. As a code owner, does it drop people, like does it avoid pinging them, requesting a review if they use the busy status? Like on GitHub, you can set your status to busy.
Oh, that would be really nice. I have no idea, but even if it does, even if it doesn't respect things like that, at the very least, like we already have bots that auto close issues and things like this. So adding another bot that auto unblocks an unresponsive code owner seems doable, even if GitHub doesn't bake in support in a nice way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with your idea of using this kind of automation in general. I was just trying to gauge if people had experience and how streamlined is the code owner's integration on GitHub. Um, yeah. maybe we need to do some more reading. I guess it's not in the documentation. I've checked that, but maybe someone written a nice blog post outlining the challenges and I don't know. It's hard because if people are running into issues with the integration, they will be documented. But if it's working smoothly and everyone is happy, I guess people don't write blog posts about that. Okay, based on the sentiment on this call, it seems like reasonable to try out adding code owners in JupyterLab, and then depending on the experience here, maybe other repositories will follow.
I just would have one question here. So if I'm not the owner and co-owner, but I review the PR, I feel the PR is perfect, and how can I vote for the PR? PR is good to go. So the owner, if the owner doesn't have time to actually review the code, but he see enough vote and he can approve that blindly. And how can the general reviewer can give the vote to the PR?
So I didn't understand code owners to mean that they are the only people able to review something. If anyone else submits a review, that should be, well, first off, there's a group that has the ability on the repo to do reviews. I think any of those reviews we just consider effectively as good as each other, because if you've got the permission to review and you've chosen to review something, your review is usually respected. If you're not a reviewer in the repo, but you're making suggestions or comments, I think again that is like normal par for the course. The code owner isn't the authority on that. It's more like if no one steps forward to voluntarily do a review, this gives guidance as to who to ping.
Okay. But uh, a user come in, they cannot voluntarily review, take on the reviewing task.
Yes,
So
that's
Or suggest himself or ask the owners to approve the reviewer, volunteer reviewer.
no, okay. So they're basically in the GitHub repo. There's permissions for certain accounts to assign a reviewer, right? And if you have that permission, I believe you could assign anyone to do the review. So if there's a member of the community who wants to review something, but they don't yet have that permission, I think just writing a comment in the PR saying, hey, I'd like to review this, allows somebody else to make them a reviewer. I think. I thought you can, if you have permission, add a third party one. But even if not, you can simply do an inline review and request the changes and all. And it's from the point of view of whoever wants to push the button to merge, seeing a bunch of comments with a bunch of suggestions unanswered would block that. It would effectively be the same as a review, but the actual specific review mechanics of GitHub means only some people are allowed to actually review and merge the PR. Yeah, but this won't change any of that. This is more like nobody's volunteered yet. How do we get a volunteer?
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah.
And just a question, do you have some statistic about the review, people who review, how many people are reviewing frequently, So I think it's, for me, for what I see, I think it's mostly Mike and Jeremy, but maybe I'm wrong. And so it should be helpful to know if there are like 4 people who review the system may not help, I guess.
Well, look, I know I almost never review unless somebody asks me to look at something, but I know that if I said, look, I care about if somebody modifies this particular package and it pinged me, I'm more likely to look at it. So my hope is that something like this will encourage kind of a long tail of small area experts who are willing to review that. And maybe it will actually increase some of that volume. And also, as Mike says, it might also help solve the problem of you come back after a while and now there's just a backlog and the backlog itself is opaque. This helps guide you for that as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think we'll just like look, if it turns out that it's the same small group of people doing reviews one way or the other, this probably will neither help them nor hurt them. But if it turns out that it somehow draws out more diffuse, like spread out review work, that'd be great.
To look at it differently, we are sometimes encouraged to think about merging proposals based on what is the cost to undo the changes. If we went for a custom bespoke workflow which responds to a comment saying, please assign a reviewer, that would be potentially hard because it requires us to add some integration, maybe GitHub app, etc. With code owners, we can just RM code owners, file removed, committed, and yeah, we can remove that easily if that doesn't work. But yeah, I would really hope that this will, for example, the Jupyter Hub folks could be added as code owners of the packages/hub extension, which is probably the only package that they really care about. And sometimes there were changes to this package which they later needed to fix because they didn't notice that. So yeah, that might also help with the just deluge of notifications.
Yeah, okay. And agree that it doesn't cost anything to do that, so we can still try and see.
We appear to have nobody else on the agenda.
Jeremy is there.
Oh, did you add something? Great. Go
Yeah,
for it.
I actually thought about this while listening to this conversation. Since we were talking about reviews and PRs, I don't know about you, but I think I think that's what you mentioned, Mike. We can't deny the fact that more and more people are using AI agents to submit PRs, and sometimes it's really visible that it comes from probably not a great model. So I was thinking that if we could at least make our job a bit easier by having some kind of AI rules in the repo so that at least I don't know, the quality of PRs would be better from the start. Maybe it's worth it. We have that kind of rules in the extension template. I think it was added before the JupyterCon. That was for the extension tutorial. I've used it in extensions. I think it works fine. We probably don't need to use the same exact Cloud or agents.md, but something similar. So yeah, if you have ideas on what to put in the search files, feel free to comment on the PR. And in any case, it's always something that we can iterate on. It's a bit like docs documentation in some way. So that could be a good starting point. I don't know. Yeah.
I had mixed feelings on your PR when I saw it earlier. I don't know if it changed since. I really like that you kind of had the references to the relevant sections of the documentation, because I feel like this is what it should be. On the other hand, the parts which were a repetition of what already is in the documentation or what could go into the documentation, there's always this argument, shouldn't it be in the human readable documentation as the primary source of truth? And then I understand that for LLMs, it is useful for them to provide them the most important parts of the context in a single place so that they can quickly digest that and only then fetch additional documents. So I was thinking, should we actually automate that somehow? Like, I know that's not how HS.md work, but in the ideal world, we could just say, we want to embed this part of the documentation, like this section and this section, that section, and that would on the fly, or maybe we can have an automation to do that, compose this file so that it always uses the most up-to-date state from the docs.
But just to clarify, you mean directly in the file, like embedding directly
Well,
in the
that
Markdown
wouldn't
file?
work. Like
No,
if we
yeah,
could have a workflow which synchronizes that. Like we do that in JupyterLab examples, right? We have snippets which have references to the
that's right.
point in the code. This kind of thing, I was thinking.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's still a draft. I'm not happy with the current state yet. But I was just curious about starting this kind of work. But I would suppose that if you put links to the path of the Markdown file that we use for the docs, then they would just follow. Sometimes, I don't know, depending on the guidance there is in these kind of prompts. But I don't know. I haven't tried to develop something real on that repo using these rules yet. But yeah. Go ahead, Entry. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, I essentially I messaged the same ideas that you just voiced, saying that the essential naive solution to address this need for dynamic embedding would be to just have sections right in the CloudMD or AgentsMD and then links under the section. So like installation, and you give a link to the docs, right? To the like latest
Yeah,
doc.
but that doesn't work as good as embedding, because when you are embedding, like our developer documentation is, I don't know, 20 pages of text, and you cannot give all of that to the model. Like you can, but you are just losing, like it's getting distracted. It's not as effective as curating which parts are essential and need to be stated. And I think the
Yeah.
best way to know which parts are essential is to just look at the PRs generated by LLMs and see where they repetitively make mistakes which we do not like, which we would not tolerate.
Yeah. So one concrete example I saw recently was, and I think you commented on that, was like the ordering of private attributes in a class. But this is like fully specified. We have like a wiki page. I don't know if anyone remember that we had that, mentioning the code style, and that there is something very simple just to give to these agents, and just follow this like and make that as a clear point, right, in these instructions. And otherwise, I don't know, like this is like a starting point, but there seems to be like more things coming also lately with this concept of skills. So we're not there yet, but maybe later there could be like some kind of more elaborate what they call it. Yeah, it's a skill that is, I don't know, using maybe a Python script to search the documentation in a more efficient way and retrieve just the parts of the docs that are needed for the LLM instead of just taking the whole thing and put it in the context window and blow everything up. So yeah, but I see that more as a second step maybe of this kind of exploration work. Yeah. Yannick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw in like we've got a coding style thing. Let's write that in a closed form tool that doesn't require dollars worth of tokens that checks that thing. Right? SemGrep, GritQL, that's inside of Biome, some language server extensions, whatever it is, because then people can get that in their editor that does not cost them money per keystroke. Right? Same kind of thing, like how do I do something? Well, as you just said, 20 pages of developer docs, people don't read the 20 pages of developer docs. If we give them a single command that's build a wheel with my changes, we've answered that like 10 times on the discourse. Like you don't today. If we had one thing to run, install this, run this, get wheel, that would help people and not the machines. It would then also help the machines. It would be great to be able to understand the machines, but I'm not sure if more docs to feed more context windows that don't actually help you get to do my job better are worth it, right? So, and not to poo-poo on it because I know you put a lot of work into it, but over on the JupyterLite setup, right? So there's no task management in there. You got to go read the documentation and know the order in which to do things. So we lost that ability to know that before I build my docs, I need to build a wheel. And before I build a wheel, I got to build an app. And before I build an app, I got to build a lib. And before I got to build a lib, we had all that stuff and it's going away. If we can get that back with something like Pixie and say, Pixie task list, here's the thing you run. This is what it does in plain English. These are the files that goes in. This is the files that comes out. I don't know how you can make something simpler for an LLM, but mostly for a human to be able to understand how do you build this giant thing that you have. What have we put here?
But I think that's a different discussion because one thing we also need to take into account is that people sometimes they just come to contribute to docs and they don't want to build the world before for just editing a markdown file. So having the possibility to just edit your file and then build the docs and then see the result in the browser and then just push the PR, I think it's still very useful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
That's why all these things have things that say don't run all the dependencies before it, right? But if you're reviewing a PR, I want to type one command and get a local build and start playing with it. Right?
I want to pick on something else that Nick said, that things like code style should be enforced by the tooling which can actually validate that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Like looking through that lens onto the proposed AgentsMD, it has build commands, it has testing, Python test, integration test, linting, formatting, and that's really all that there should be, plus some links, and plus maybe some frequently repeated mistakes section for what we get really annoyed from the PRs that are already open. Because every other thing like import paths, and there is an example of how the imports path should be written, and naming conventions. I think all of that should instead be made into linting rules, which is what I'm going to work on starting sometime this month or next month. Yeah, I think let's merge this soon and see whether this improves the situations with the PRs we are getting. But maybe let's not add more naming conventions and patterns. Let's just have an issue for ourselves to implement them into the linting machinery, which enforces them.
I mean, in the ideal world, these AI tools, they would, they would use the proper tooling like the LSP or the lint scripts, but not all of them do.
They do. Well, not all of them, right?
It depends, yeah. But I was thinking about more about the like the lazy contributor that is just throwing the LLM at the code and then opening the PR and not configuring anything, right?
So we need to add a disclaimer: if you are using an LLM, please use a clever.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, just trying to see like if we can at least have like the kind of the one-shot output of the LLM be as good as possible. But otherwise, I completely agree that like the best would be to have this tight feedback loop where the LLM can just correct itself if it noticed that the lint script didn't pass anymore because
and pre-commit is even better, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, could also be pre-commit. Yeah. Maybe we don't need to start a new debate on pre-commit right now. That would be for the next meeting. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for me.
I wanted to share one, I don't know, like approach to this CloudMD and things like that. So both me and one of my teammates independently arrived to the conclusion that having, testing instructions and the guidance to run a certain set of tests after each change automatically, for the agent kind of really helps in terms of then agent can kind of run in a loop, right? After making a change, it makes a change, runs tests. If they're not working, fixes them. So yeah, our tests are pretty, not lightweight, especially if we talk E2E. So I'm not sure if we want to do that, but I did wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, and the better data you can get out of it, the better, right? So, UI profiler is out of the loop and you got to do that yourself. But if someone's going to spend the money, I want them to also run the profiling. If there's coverage, I don't know where our coverage gets reported or captured, but I want it to look at coverage and not add things that unnecessarily tank coverage. And then accessibility, but that's the whole jam. Still need a test approach for that.
I'm sorry. Clearly, I'm writing things in chat that I don't want to speak onto a recorded call that we'll put on YouTube. So I shall wait until the call is over and say those things. Is there something somebody else would like to say in the recorded portion of the call, or should we stop the recording? Okay, YouTube can live with this.
I got one thing.
Go
so
for it.
There's like CondaForge, hate CondaForge, whatever. There's people in this call that contribute to CondaForge, and there's people that consume stuff on CondaForge, like a lot of things. So there's discussion about the JupyterLab widgets package. So presently, like many lab extensions, it delivers its stuff to sysprefix/share/Jupyter/lab extension/whatever its namespace is by way of a PyPy wheel. We decided, at the end of the adventure on JupyterLab, whatever major version that was, that it was not fun for everybody to have to run, Node.js locally. So we started putting stuff in wheels. There are some requests, which I don't know, whatever, to be able to install the lab extension without installing the Python side of that lab extension, which is nothing. It's just metadata and it tells you where it is, and that's all it is. What this would do is the suggestion, I mean, the correct way, not whoever other way does it, but we would split that into two packages. So you'd have, probably about 8 kilobytes of metadata on the on the PyPy side. It'd be dist info, metadata, dist info, direct entry, dist info, whatever. And then the other side would just be share JupyterLab extensions. So packages that weren't related to Python and were using some other backend entirely would be able to consume directly that package without bringing in Python. I don't think it's worth it, but I just wanted to put that out there for anybody that does weird crap with Conda packages and how breaking that would be if the JupyterLab widgets lab extension was in a differently named package, and I don't even know what that'd be called yet, that the existing package depended on. Yeah. Because like on JupyterLite, say again?
Sounds fine.
Okay. I mean, like the thing I called out was on the JupyterLite examples, we directly consumed that named package. And we would just change that, right? Because we happen to know that we are consuming that package, and we would pick a different package and it wouldn't have that. And it would just have those things. It's a Conda Forge issue until it's not just a Conda Forge issue, right? So if you're in some other ecosystem by some other company and they package something some way and Conda Forge starts doing something differently, and then you start depending on other stuff, now your stuff isn't there, and then someone complains that it doesn't work in their heavyweight Qt application, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the only thing. There's a link in the chat. I'll repost it if anybody wants to weigh in. But yes, it would be the only change would occur on Conda Forge, and that's it.
I recall that there are some kernels which distribute extensions outside of Python ecosystem. I don't remember that was kernel, Julia kernel or Scala. Yeah.
Well, not just outside of the ecosystem, outside of anything. I mean, like they provision that stuff over the COM or something like that. Like it's very far off the beaten path of what they have. Now, I'm not saying we don't want the ability at some point in the future to have kernel-based contents, and we've talked about that.
No, I was thinking more about like, can we make it easier for people to not have to use Python to distribute pre-built federated extensions?
If the I mean, okay, you got to pick another. So wearing my Conda Forge hat, yes, you'd use Conda Forge. Wearing every other package manager hat, no, I don't. I mean, like Node.js doesn't know what sys prefix is. You have to write executable scripts that are run at install time, and people turn those off to be able to put stuff into sys prefix. So,
Yeah, but I think the only kind of difficulty is around paths, like where does this thing go? And then basically improving the documentation would be the only thing we could do, unless we also write a script which checks whether the place where you put the file is the right place. But no, that's obvious. Kind of something which would help to debug that. Maybe that's more important. But yeah, we cannot add a wrapper to help people distribute things.
I mean, you would need a Jupyter core package that provided, paths, just those paths, for every kernel language. And that is not a thing, to be able to know where those things are, because not every language runtime has that concept. They're mostly going to look in slash, and that's not always what you want.
Since we are over the hour, I propose stopping the recording, and anyone who wishes can sign off, and then we can perhaps continue if need be. But yeah, I'm going to hit the stop button, so brace yourselves.